Hi folks, welcome back to Perspectives and the overview of uncertainty reduction theory. We're going to do a quick flyover of this theory, but I have to warn you from the beginning that this is one of the more complex theories that we will engage in. It's a theory that has been widely used in the discipline and actually adopted by other disciplines and modified by even sub-disciplines within the communication studies area. So really interesting theory, but a little bit complex and definitely falls on that scientific, that psychological scientific end of the theorizing spectrum. So uncertainty reduction theory has as its primary concern the thought that in initial interaction, when two people first meet each other, one of the primary driving motivations or goals is to reduce uncertainty, or on the flip side, increase predictability about the behavior of both of the people in the interaction. So Berger and Calabrese, way back in 1975, came up with this concept. And you'll note right away that the concept has a lot of resonance with that linear model of communication that we had talked about, the first kind of model that was sort of prevalent back in the 60s and 70s, that had a sender receiver message channel response. And from that electronic information science model, the primary objective was getting rid of noise. And uncertainty is a kind of noise. So the purpose of the theory is so that people can cope with their environment, make sense out of their interpersonal worlds. And we're going to put it in a nutshell that says uncertainty is uncomfortable, people don't like it, and so people strive to reduce that uncertainty and increase their ability to predict and explain. And communication is how we do that. Now, you need to ask yourselves, do you agree with that assumption? Is our primary concern in initial interaction reducing uncertainty? So keep that in the back of your mind. Now, this theory has 5 basic assumptions with a couple of corollary ideas, as many of the theories that we're looking at do. And so we're going to run through those really quickly. The first assumption is that people experience uncertainty in interpersonal settings, and that uncertainty, it produces cognitive stress. We don't like that. We like to reduce our uncertainty. A great example of this is your first day in classes, right? When you're going to a class and you want to find out, what do I have to do in order to do well in this class? And from the syllabus to the first day of class where the prof is explaining what's going to happen in that class, and in your mind, it's all about reducing the uncertainty. Also, am I going to like this class? Am I going to like this professor? Am I going to like the people that I'm studying with? So all of the uncertainties. And what you're trying to do in that first couple of days, couple of class sessions, is figure out, am I going to stay in this class? So that's a great environment where we typically experience a lot of uncertainty. Or put yourself into other new situations. When you first came to Bethel during Welcome Week, meeting all the new students and your roommates and people in your dorm. Or when you first start on a job and you're meeting people and learning the new, the tasks that you need to do in your job. I think about some of the jobs. I served in a number of restaurants in server capacities, and you've got to learn the menu, and you've got to learn. In college, I served at a pretty expensive hot cuisine restaurant as a singing waiter, no less. And so I was learning songs. I was dealing with the stress of having to sing in front of strangers. And I was learning a menu, and this particular restaurant, you had to be really familiar with all of the drink combinations and wines and brandies and all of that, and what went with what. And I was pretty unfamiliar with the whole alcohol scene. So that kind of uncertainty tends to stress us out. That's the first assumption. The second assumption is that our primary concern when we meet strangers is, again, reducing uncertainty and increasing predictability. So we mentioned that as kind of the driving motivation behind this theory. So that is one of the assumptions. The third assumption is that interpersonal communication occurs in stages. So first there's the entry phase, then we have a personal phase, We have an exit phase, and interpersonal communication is the primary means of uncertainty reduction that takes place in these phases of initial meeting, becoming more personal and getting to know someone, and then leaving a relationship. So it happens in stages. The fourth and fifth assumptions are that the quantity and nature of information that people share changes over time. So uncertainty can be dynamic. It can ebb and flow in a relationship. Even in a long-term developed relationship, there can still be periods of uncertainty and unpredictability. And then the last assumption is that it is possible to predict people's behavior in a law-like fashion. This theory is an objective, covering laws theory. And so they are making that assumption that it is possible to create variables that then allow us to predict behavior in a relationship. And so this theory will move from axioms, which are assumptions derived from research and experience, to theorems, which are combinations of axioms that allow us to make testable theoretical statements. And then we can posit a relationship between two of those concepts or variables. Okay, so these are the assumptions of the theory. Let's talk for a minute about the motivations for uncertainty. What motivates us to get to know someone? Think about that for a second. Why do you want to get to know a particular person? What makes them interesting? Why did you want to pursue a certain friendship or relationship? Well, the theory suggests that there are some typical motivations or what they call antecedent conditions. Your text uses that word, antecedent condition. One is that you anticipate the need for future interaction with that person. So what motivates you to get to know your professors? Well, you've got to be in their class for a whole semester. And so better that you get to know them and they get to know you, and maybe they then smile upon your assignments or look upon them more favorably once you develop that personal relationship. And that's true. It works. Get to know your professors. The second motivation is there's some incentive value. You have some incentive for getting to know that person. They have something that you want. So they might have the ability to reward or punish you in some way. So getting to know a certain friend because their dad works for a certain company, and maybe that relationship can get you an interview for an internship or something like that. So there's incentive value. Maybe getting to know your boss or something like that, because then they might give you more responsibility or a raise or whatever it is. And then the third reason is sometimes people are just interesting to us and we want to get to know them because they're a little different. You know, they deviate from normal behavior or expectations. They act in a way that is curious to us. And so we want to get to know them a little bit better for that reason. So those are some of the three typical or basic motivations for why people pursue relationships. And these are generalized relationships, not necessarily romantic relationships. Obviously, if we get into the area of romantic relationships, there are lots of other reasons for that. So let's talk a little bit about this idea that uncertainty reduction is designed to predict and explain, so that we know that it comes from that covering laws objective side of the spectrum. And as I mentioned, their focus on predictability comes straight from the Shannon and Weaver information theory model. As your ability to predict what alternatives or behaviors are likely to occur next decreases, so you're getting less information or worse at predicting, then your uncertainty is going to increase and you're going to want to decrease that uncertainty. Now, they do stipulate that there are two kinds of uncertainty. There is behavioral uncertainty, how should I act in a certain situation, and there's also cognitive uncertainty. What are they like? What are their beliefs? What are their values? Why are they doing that? So there are those two levels of uncertainty happen at the same time and are often overlapped, but we can tease them out and say, okay, this is a behavioral level of uncertainty and this is cognitive uncertainty. The model for that, or the mathematical model in uncertainty reduction, is that one piece of information, one bit, reduces my uncertainty by half. So we'll uncertainty ever completely go away? No, because if you keep reducing something by half, there's always something there, right? So it allows you get some information. It allows you to discard or answer some of the questions that you had, but there's still remaining questions, remaining mystery, remaining unknowns. Now, they do talk about when we reduce uncertainty. Sometimes we reduce uncertainty ahead of an interaction, and they call that proactive. They lump that in the proactive processes, our attempts to reduce uncertainty before we engage with someone. And then there's also retroactive uncertainty reduction, where we apply sense making after we meet someone and we try to kind of rethink through what happened in that interaction and what just took place. So retroactive and proactive are different kinds or time periods in which uncertainty reduction takes place. We're going to dive into the axioms and theorems way more heavily in class, but to quickly just kind of broad brush paint them, and they're described in your reading. But they came up with a number of different axioms. Your book only covers 7 of the axioms. I'm going to give you all 9. The axioms try to explain the connection between the concept of uncertainty and 8 key variables plus 1 in interpersonal relationship development. And these are variables that are present in a lot of interpersonal research. So one is the amount of verbal output in a relationship. Number 2 axiom is the nonverbal warmth in a relationship. Your book will define each one of these. Information seeking, how we go about getting information about people or from people. Self-disclosure, the depth and intimacy that is created in a relationship through self-disclosure. Reciprocity, that idea that I become vulnerable to you and you in turn become vulnerable to me. The basis of similarity that we might have, the amount of liking that's present in a relationship. And then the 2 that your text doesn't cover are the amount of shared networks. And both these axioms were developed later in later work on this theory, but the number of shared connections in your network, and then also satisfying communication goals or communication satisfaction. So those are the axioms that the book's going to look at those, and we will play with and work on those in class. I did want to close with the strategies that people use to cope with uncertainty, because we aren't going to have a lot of time to talk about those in class. So Berger and Calabrese suggested that people actually develop plans and approaches to cope with uncertainty, and they came up with some typical strategies that people use and methods or strategies, and then some particular strategies within information seeking. So they said that people cope with uncertainty either by seeking information, by creating a plan and choosing the complexity of that plan, by going through a process of hedging, and then developing a hierarchy hypothesis. The main one in your book focuses on the information seeking strategy or method, and so we'll talk about that. The seeking information strategy really can be broken down into 3 strategies that Berger and colleagues developed. One, or really observed. One is the passive strategy, and that means that you go about collecting information by observing others from a distance. There isn't any actual engagement. And they talk about reactivity searching and disinhibition searching in the book as examples of that. So watching somebody in class that maybe you're interested in getting to know, and you watch how they react to certain things that are talked about in class or to certain scenarios in class. The second strategy is an active strategy where you actually on your own to make effort and show initiative to ask people about that person. So you ask a third party for information. Hey, do you know so-and-so? And you get some information about them to try to form your own opinions and approach perhaps to getting to know that person, or whether they're even worth getting to know. And then the third strategy is an interactive strategy. So here you're actually going to engage face-to-face with that person and explore questions and get, actually talk with them, get to know them. Or maybe you engage them on social media and, friend them on LinkedIn or Instagram, follow them on Instagram or friend them on Facebook and watch their TikTok videos, whatever it might be. Obviously, the third strategy is the quickest route to getting to know them and forming a solid basis for getting to know them. You're also employing the law of reciprocity, that as you take the initiative to engage with them, hopefully they will then open up and engage with you. And maybe there would be a mutual pursuit of each other on a relationship basis and getting to know one another as friends. So the law of reciprocity suggests that it's real, or it's best to be real with one another. That is uncertainty reduction theory. We will dive into it more in class and get into actually testing it and working with some of the axioms and theorems. We will see you then.